In 1945, Korea gained independence from 36 years of Japan's occupational rule. But the Korean War broke out, even before they could enjoy the fruits of their newfound freedom. Countless North and South Korean soldiers lost their lives, along with another 36,000 troops from 21 foreign nations. Taking a toll of some 5 million casualties, the Korean War left the newly formed republic in a state of devastation.
Korea was very poor, all destroyed. We had to fight for the liberty and democracy of the Republic of Korea.
However, during the busy efforts of restoration, it was nothing but education which became the nation's highest priority. Although they were struggling from day to day, Korean parents did not ignore the education of their children. Grateful for the sacrifice of their parents, children would walk for miles in order to attend school. Despite the war's devastation, the government continued to invest in education. This dedication to and investment in education produced a highly trained workforce that would later on become the impetus for Korea's economic turnaround. Unable to recover from the ruins of war on its own, Korea was forced to rely on foreign aid. But when the foreign aid subsided after completion of the major restoration work, this caused Korea's economic growth to stall. This was a dire situation for a nation whose budget relied more than 90% on foreign aid. It was at this time that the military regime came to power. Having succeeded in a military intervention, its leadership made economic development their top priority, if only to quell widespread public turmoil. In order to spur economic growth, the military regime founded the Economic Planning Board, giving it unprecedented powers for planning, allocating the budget, and for attracting foreign capital. The Economic Planning Board developed a 5-year plan, which was to be the new blueprint for economic development. In 1962, the first 5-year plan was put into action. The problem was the acquisition of funds. Unfortunately, the United States reacted with indifference. Berger, the United States ambassador to Korea at the time, also made a negative report on this plan to Washington, D.C. But Korea did not give up. After endless efforts, they were able to receive an inflow of capital from West Germany. The miners and nurses that were dispatched to West Germany sent their earnings home, and the government was able to obtain loans by pledging these funds as collateral. This was helpful, but far from enough. Due to an inability to attract sufficient funds, the Korean economy took a nosedive. Fortunately, the light industry sectors like textiles, wigs, and needlework developed rapidly and created momentum for the Korean economy's growth. While guiding the economy with policies such as rationalization of the exchange rate and interest rates in 1964 and 1965, the government also responded to the market's demands and fostered free enterprise. However, since the light industries relied on low-cost wages, their competitiveness weakened. The government began to invest in new industries, such as steel, coal, chemicals, machinery, and shipbuilding, to create a powerful engine for economic growth.
I think it is dynamic as well as their foresights towards future and their interpretation of globalization into business opportunities.
Steel was the first heavy industry to be developed. Despite skepticism and concern about the feasibility of such a venture, the government launched a massive effort to build an integrated steel mill in 1970. The United States and the world looked upon this project with doubts, as the steel industry requires massive investment and cutting-edge technology. And a more advanced nation than Korea at that time had attempted this task, but failed. In spite of such skepticism, the Pohang Steel Mill began to produce steel in 1973. Although it entered the steel industry about 60 years later than advanced nations, Korea would soon become the world's fourth largest producer of steel. The success of this primary industry paved the way for the advancement of other steel-related industries, such as shipbuilding, automobiles, fine machinery, construction, and electronics. The New Community Movement is considered as one of the crucial forces in promoting the growth of the Korean industry. When the New Community Movement began in the 1970s, the Korean government was virtually bankrupt. But the support that they did manage to provide was used effectively by Koreans in improving their living standards. 33,267 villages in Korea received free cement. For the next 2 years, only villages that showed promise were given additional cement and steel. The government decided to support the communities that had the will to stand on their own. The people also cast off their self-doubt and gained confidence that anything was possible, which nurtured hope for a bright future. Once a movement to increase the revenue of farms, the New Community Movement made its way into all sectors of society, increasing social awareness in the cities, factories, and the workplaces. This showed that poverty could not be overcome through foreign aid alone, and that the true path to success lies in deeply rooted solutions that can change the core of society. This grassroots effort, coupled with a global economic boom, helped to fuel an amazing economic growth in Korea. But a crisis emerged from an unexpected source. In October 1973, the Yom Kippur War broke out. With the price of raw materials skyrocketing, the domestic factories ground to a halt while inflation soared. This was a critical blow to Korea, since it was a country without a drop of oil, which had just begun to industrialize. But this crisis proved to be an opportunity. The Korean government used the construction boom in the Middle East, which resulted from the skyrocketing oil prices, dispatching workers to the region and constructing $10 billion worth of buildings a year, and used the oil crisis to stimulate economic growth. Around this time, another oil shock occurred. After learning valuable lessons from the first crisis, Korea overcame the second oil shock without much difficulty. During the two oil shocks, most other countries decreased their investment. but not Korea. For the first oil shock, Korea invested heavily in its steel, oil, chemicals, machinery, and shipbuilding industries, while in response to the second oil shock, Korea boldly restructured its economy. Their strategy was right on target. The phenomena of the three lows, the US dollar, oil prices, and interest rates, helped the Korean economy to flourish in the 1980s.